Tepid applause. All right. Frankie is the guy who owns the fucking place you're in right now, so show some respect. All right. So why am I not on the screen, man?
Just send TV.
Something else covered.
It's like we're gonna sit on.
Oh, wow.
All right, that's the thing that I want to see. All right, and perfect, and all right, there we go. Welcome everybody to Denver Ember August. Yeah! So I would first like to thank our sponsors, Digabit, Ibotta, and Zero. Anybody from Ibotta here? Hey, Alex, tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Ibotta is I'll try and get the marketing terminology correct here, mobile cashback app. So you can get
that pays you cash.
It gives you cash. It literally gives you cash. So you can get cash on the things you already buy. Just take a picture of your receipt.
Beautiful. Digabit, are we hiring Ben?
We're hiring a mid to senior full stack engineer on our web team, so Ember and Rails. And today we also launched cashback on mobile apps. So use Ibotta to launch things like Groupon and Jet and get somewhere between 5 and 40% cash back. So check out Ibotta. Cool. And if you're interested, mid to senior full stack engineer.
Hell yeah.
Or my referral code.
Rock on. Digabitters. Who do we got from Digabit here? Dennis?
Just that's me. We're not hiring right now, so I'll bore you with what we do when we're hiring.
Cheers. Fair enough. All right. I see you, bro. Brett, you want to talk about Zero?
Well, just jumping. Yeah, we do sort of web consultancy. We focus on Ember, Rails, Node, and we also do design. So do a lot of experiments with GL, stuff like that, as well as just applications and talk about applications.
Banger right. All right, so welcome to the Ember community. Who here is kind of new to this? All right, good handful of you. So raise your hand if you were on this list. All right, take a look around. I got some people in the back. This is your Denver Ember leadership community. If you have questions about Ember or what we do here or the meetups and how they work, how you might be able to contribute, these are the folks you want to talk to. All right, we have people in the hangout. I think it might be first. No, that's a second. That's happened before. We also have an open source night. Who has been to one of the open source nights before? Hey, hey, handful of folks. So these are very different than our regular meetups. For regular meetups, we have like the tutorial up front. We have speakers, that kind of thing. The open source nights are very much focused on making software. So if you're new to open source, if you're new to Ember, if you're experienced with open source and just want to like be around other people who also care about that, this is the meetup you want to go to. We try to do it in alternating weeks with the Ember meetup. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But when you see one of those meetup.com invites, that's what's happening there. Different than this, it's coding all night with a bunch of like-minded folks.
We may do it in 2 to 3 weeks. If you're interested, come talk to me. Trying to stay cold and win.
Yep. So this is very much a like interest-driven thing. So when we have people who are interested in doing that, we make it so. So David Baker in the back, that's who you want to chat with. So outside of Denver, if you're new to the Ember community, we have badass forums. We have a community Slack. EmberConf happens every March. And we have a global Ember meetup, which is something you can remote into, something you hear referred to as GenConf. That's what that's all about.
When you talk about the community Slack, are you talking about Denver devs or are you talking about?
No, we have that. We have that also. Who here is a member of the Denver Dev Slack? I should see almost every hand up here. If you are not, join.denverdevs.com. There is a topic Ember, I think it is, and a Meetup Ember. Topic Ember, no, it's Help Ember. Help Ember is if you are working on Ember app and you go like, I can't make my ret work for the following reason. You have people there like from your community ready to help you. If it's a conversation about this meetup, when is the next one? What are we talking about? Can I talk? Did my PR get accepted? That is Meetup Ember, probably Ember.js, something like that. Not that many channels. So join.denverdevs.com. That's what that is. There's also a like global Ember community Slack that has like thousands and thousands of people where you can yell at Yehuda and Tom Katz, like core team members, like our very own David Baker. Yeah! He hates when I call him a core team member, but he has the ear of very powerful people. So that all happens on that community Slack. But we also have Denver Dev Slack. Cool. So some news in the Ember world right now. 2.7 just came out. The big news here is that if you're using Backburner directly, that is deprecated. That means you can still use it, but it's going to get dropped in 3.0. Direct Ember bindings. Like I see less and less and less of these. But if you were doing something like that naming convention for a property or something, you go, my property binding, and then a thing, that's out. So your QFs will still work. That's going to get dropped in 3. And then for your computed properties, if you're doing Ember computed something, like all of the other ones, like sort and what have you, they had like sort by. We also have a unique by, where you can get something that's unique by a particular property. 2.8 beta was also released, which gives us like native, like direct engine support. And the DS module is back. This is like a big welcome for me because like, I don't know, like, okay, so if you're using like any of the 2 stuff where they did the destructuring thing, was like, I want this and this and this from Ember data, and it was like really awkward. You to look it up every time. The user experience on that was shit. So we're back to like that will still work if you have a Q app. That will continue to work, but we're back to importing from the DS module, and so you do DS adder, DS belongs to, all that kind of stuff again. And this is the real exciting one. Glimmer 2.0 is an alpha now. So if you have seen the EmberConf opening keynote from this year, where they talked about the improvements they're making, like Glimmer 2.0 was really the badass. If you're from outside of this community, you might know that Ember is this sprawling, opinionated way that we make web apps that includes a view layer, a data layer, routing, all of these kinds of things. And you're like, well, what about React? I hear a lot of cool shit about React. React is this very small part of the things that Ember covers. Glimmer is that part in Ember. And by the benchmarks, Glimmer 2.0 was faster, better, cooler, sexier, like had like better rock and roll concerts, all that kind of stuff, than React by pinching a lot of those ideas and adding some flavor of its own. Some other things that come out of that are like, you'll hear this referred to in the community as like angle bracket components. That really means the thing that us and Angular 2 and React are all sort of shooting for, which is this web component standard, where the web component is outside of the framework and is the thing that you write in Ember is also usable in React what have you. But Glimmer 2.0 unlocks a shit ton of other stuff in Ember that we've been waiting for a very, very long time. I can't remember who it was. Steve, I think you were standing there when we were talking about this, and I was like, man, Glimmer 2.0 is going to bring the future. And the guy was like, the future's already here. He was the Obi-Wan Kenobi. Who was that? Oh, well, he was the random guy. He's the guy, he was one of the biggest Ember add-ons.
Yeah.
I forget what it is.
It was very, like, unsettling. He just, like, walked into his, like, a stare, but
right, well, he was not a, like, socially apt person, but is a major part of the Ember community. And he was like, the TLDR on that is that there's a lot of stuff that we've been waiting for a very long time in Ember that has been blocked by this. And the way that they rolled out the release on this is you're able to test this right now with a flag on like your Ember create CLI statement. And try this out. This is going to probably be live, my guess, in 12 weeks. And like this is the game changer. This is really what 2.0 was all about. And it's what's going to make 3.0 like the fucking future.
Glimmer's in Canary right now for 2.9. It's going to be post 2.8. So 2.8 is going to be.
So it's in Canary, that means it's going to be in beta and then be in release on the 6-week cycle? Hell yeah. Beautiful. Okay, these are the things that I found. What else did I miss? Ember radios. What else is happening in Ember last month? Ben?
2.8 will be the next LTS. So for people who can't upgrade like literally all the time, so we're trying to upgrade like twice a year. 2.4 was the last LTS. 2.8 will be released, and then after 6 weeks, it'll be marked as an LTS. So if you're working for a company who can't upgrade all the time, if you have multiple Ember projects, shoot for an LTS, because those will get security patches for 90-some weeks. So if you are a consulting shop or something, shoot for the LTS releases, which they don't advertise a ton. Like if you Ember new, you'll always get the newest one. But if you need long-term support, use 2.4 or 2.8.
Amen. And if you're new-ish to software development, LTS is long-term support. So like we do releases every 6 weeks. The ones that get the 90-week support, if you are a business or whatever, those are the LTS releases, and those are every, how many releases? 4? 4. Every fourth release is an LTS release. So if you need a target to shoot for, convince your company of like, try this thing, it doesn't change like every 6 weeks. LTS is what you want to shoot for. Other stuff that is happening in the Ember world. There's an app, I should have brought it up ahead of time, but it shows how freight ships move in real time. Did anybody else look at that? It was at the last, the Ember Weekly newsletter. It's right at the bottom of it. It's an Ember app that shows real time every freight ship, and it does like a day time lapse like that. It shows them moving around the world. And it blew my goddamn mind. It shows you where the shipping lanes are, how important like the Suez Canal is. Like everything from Europe just condenses, then moves down this and explodes out of that. Ember app, way cool. Awesome. So the meetup location. We've done this here historically. We did it at Ibotta a little bit. And for like the last 3 months, 4 months, and we're trying to find an awesome long-term home for this meetup. This is very homey. Ibotta is very like spacious, has a lot of amenities. Like the locations are very different, and also we have other options. We could do this at Galvanize. We could do it at Code Talent. These are not difficult things to wrangle from like a meetup organizer standpoint. So we really want to figure out like, where should this be? And so Ben has worked out, do you have like pens and all that kind of stuff also?
I opened up Microsoft Word today
Nice.
and created this lovely form.
Hell yeah.
So we submitted a poll on Meetup.com that we got a solid 8 responses to. So feel free to mark as many of these as make sense for you. So like if downtown here, Town is good, just mark this, put it face down or whatever, and just let us know. We can try to wrangle something else. We just want to make sure, like, if I bought a parking is a pain or whatever, let us know and we'll try to move it.
Amen.
So make sure you fill one of these out before you just that there.
Please. Like, this is part of our continuous improvement and make sure this is a valuable resource for everybody. Neat. So, who here is looking for work? Hands. Okay, cool. So that's enough to do some individual introductions. Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a web developer. I come from a business background. I'm really passionate about learning new things. I'm very open-minded. I've been working, doing a lot of projects in Angular lately, but I'm really excited to maybe start something in Ember as well.
Cool. Say start Daniel also? Yeah.
My name's Daniel. I'm also a web developer, shopping via Meetup. I'm getting super interested into the Internet of Things stuff. I just did like a proof of concept smart home application and want to start using actual feedback from devices, PC devices and stuff. But I'm open to pretty much any kind of mean stack type roles, full back end, front end, whatever. So.
Cool. Lucas.
I raised my hand.
Laney. Fuck both of you. All right. Who else? Yeah.
I'll go. I'm Lucy. Preference for back-end, but I'm learning JavaScript right now. It's pretty fun. About to start a personal project, so I'm deciding between doing something in Ember or doing like a Node, Express, React stack. So you guys got it. That's great tonight.
Cool. Who else? Yeah.
My name is Sunny. Strong Ruby Rails, but kind of moving very fast towards the JavaScript world. Had a lot of fun with like React Native. But I think you went to Ross.
Yeah, Edward?
Yeah.
Hell yeah!
Yeah, he's always talking about Ember, so I wanted to check it out. And what I've heard, just like 30 minutes.
God bless Ross. Cool. Who else? Yeah.
I'm Mark. I'm a .NET engineer, but primarily Ember.js, also worked in Rails. Currently working in Polymer Dart, done some Angular, done Mean Stack, and crapped on other stuff as well too. So I'm on a full stack in SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, and just all the way around.
Awesome. So you had me at Polymer. I did a project in Polymer, and that was like the worst API I think I've ever used. And I was like, anybody who understands this is a god. So thank you for being that the rest of us. All right. Looking to hire. Who's got jobs right now? Anyone? Yeah, Ben.
So yeah, we're Ben with Avada. So we're hiring currently on our platform team, which is primarily Ruby on Rails. There's a lot of like interesting processing stuff. So as Alex mentioned, taking photos of receipts. So there's lots of OCR, neural nets, that kind of stuff, as well as your more standard like building APIs, that kind of thing. For the platform engineer position, we're shooting mid to senior, but there's a chance for junior devs. And then there's one on my team for a full stack engineer, primarily Ruby on Rails, but also some Ember.js, looking mid to senior for sure on that.
Bangarang. Other jobs, other people hiring. So for like people, like you should definitely talk to Ben about positions that for the senior stuff. If you don't have a job right now to offer, or if you're still looking for a job, you might know people who are. What I will say about Ember.js skills is one of the neat things about a mega opinionated framework is that you have to know how like web architecture works to make anything run. You'll hear people like, this is the complaint, this is the stones that people throw at Ember. It's like it's a brick wall learning curve. But once you're over the top of that, something like Angular, even like React, Redux, all that kind of stuff, very simple patterns to learn. So even if all this ever is a tool for you to learn how software architecture works, good use of your time. So as you're talking to each other after our fantastic lightning talks this evening, keep in mind, like, who might I be able to introduce this person to that is looking for something just like you? Awesome. So that's enough jibber jabber. Let's fucking party, man! Yeah! Little more excitement! Yeah! All right. So our first talk this evening. His company's Breaks Conefire today. He is the personal resource for all of the development community to ask questions and complain about their commuting stuff. He is my very good friend. He's about to be yours, RTD Steve. Yeah!
All right, so I plug in.
So can I do like speaker now?
And the only thing I want to do in this whole world is be cooler than Neverscript. So. Achieves. Wow.
All right, I think we're ready.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, RTD Steve.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, so like Kyle said, my name is Steve. I have a last name. It is Suzina. It's Polish, if you're wondering. I'm a front-end developer at RTD, the public transit agency here in Denver. So we run all the bus and light rail here in town, and the line to the airport, really open in April. So I've been working in Ember for a couple of years now, kind of dabbling, and right now I'm working on RTD's first production Ember app. It should be hitting production this fall or later this year, definitely by the year end because we have a hard deadline. So looking forward to that. I think we're gonna hit it though. Yeah, so I'm talking about maps tonight. So talk of the title is map all the things. So not this kind of map. So we're not talking about like the array prototype function or array method mapping. We're talking about this kind of map. So at RTD, if you hopefully it's not too surprising, but we have a lot of maps that we have to use in our apps. And as it so happens on this Ember app I'm building, I spent the last like 2 months just kind of banging my head against the wall, figuring out how to do maps in Ember in a way that works well and makes me happy as a developer. So I've tried out a few different approaches during that time and made some mistakes, learned some lessons, and told a few of you earlier this evening that I still feel like I'm kind of figuring it out and haven't landed on exactly where I want to be yet, but I kind of know where I want to go. So I'm going to share some of that, some of those insights with you, hopefully save you some of the effort, because imagine you guys probably don't have 2 months to spend just trying to figure out how to put a map in your application. So that's my goal tonight. So I have some bad news. Map APIs kind of suck. As an example, well, to start, they tend to be very imperative rather than declarative. So you end up writing a lot of code that says like, make me a new thing and put it here in the DOM, and then do this to update it and do this when it changes. So like DOM manipulation, imperative APIs, they're just not great for particularly in Ember, but if just in general, they kind of suck to work with, and they tend to be really ugly. So this is an example of using the Google Maps API. All this code does, all this code here, all it does is draw a map on the page, and it creates a marker and binds an info window to that marker. So I have a little code pen embed here. So it puts a marker here on 0, and I don't know if the embed will actually work. Yeah, it does. So it lets you do a little info window. See if that catches up. Oh, I don't think it will. Anyway, if you clicked on that marker, an info window would pop up. But it takes a lot of code just to make that happen. And if you look at the code, it's a lot of like, we'll flip back here. So it's a lot of like new Google Maps map, like a lot of document get element by ID. Down here, there's another like new keyword, another new keyword, like add event listener. Eventually you have to manage removing that event listener. You're going to get some memory leaks. So there's just a lot to deal with in kind of the out-of-the-box API. And a lot of the other mapping libraries are kind of the same way. So the good news is that Ember is pretty good at wrapping bad APIs with awesome APIs that are a lot nicer. So the first thing we're going to look at is kind of doing it yourself with Ember, and we're going to use make it a little component to give us a much nicer API for putting a map on the page using a component rather than all that kind of messy imperative code. So fortunately, the Ember guides come to the rescue here. Thank you to our friend David Baker. So there's a tutorial in the current version of the Ember guides. You'll find it under services and utilities tutorial over there. And it happens to tell you exactly how to make your own mapping component using the Google Maps API. So there's kind of 3 big ideas here in this tutorial. First, you want to make a component that displays a map. Then you want to make a service that kind of manages the map API and is capable of caching like maps that have already been rendered. Then you make a utility that would allow you to create a map in your page and put it into the page. So it's kind of a lot of code you end up having to write yourself. For an example, this is like this is what you would end up with though. So you end up writing a lot of code with the service and the utility and the component, but you end up being able to make a map just by doing like a location map, and then you pass it a location. So that's kind of what we're going for when we kind of write one of these components, a map component. But there's a lot of functionality in these map APIs that this doesn't really cover. So this lets you put a location on a map, maybe a marker, but there's a lot of things that you can do with maps that this doesn't offer. And if you wanted to do it yourself, you'd end up having to write a lot of code to basically re-implement something like the Google Maps API. So it's going to cover things like markers, polylines, shapes, overlays, events. So that's stuff that we don't want to have to worry about ourselves. You don't want to have to write the unit test for that. You don't want to have to like learn the API and all of its ins and outs to be able to do this. So one awesome thing about the Ember ecosystem is the add-on ecosystem for Ember. So this is kind of like let someone else write the code and you just use it. So they're really going to come to the rescue here in this situation. So we're going to look at 3 of the big mapping add-ons that are kind of worth your time. The first one is Ember Leaflet. The next one is Ember Mapbox, and then the third one is Ember Gmap. So these tend to be like the 3 biggest ones. They're all 8 out of 10 on the Ember Observer website. The Ember Leaflet is actually a 10 out of 10. So it's kind of a good place to start. And these are the 3 that I kind of have gone through on my own and figured out all the little quirks of the APIs and what works and what doesn't. So one really fortunate thing is that all these add-ons kind of have a very similar API when it comes to the components that they expose to you to use in your application. So these add-ons, they take all those major parts of a mapping application like markers, polylines, shapes, info windows, and they componentize all of them. So they give you a way to declaratively add things like markers or info windows into your template without having to write all that imperative code and add it to the DOM manually. So this is an example of that 0 map marker that I showed earlier with just kind of a generic map add-on component structure. So like any of those 3 add-ons I mentioned are going to look very similar to this. Where you see add-on map, it might say Ember Gmap or Gmap or Mapbox or whatever the particular add-on is called. But so for example, like the first component we have up here just creates a map. We give it a lat long. The next one has we create a marker with a lat long, so that puts the marker on 0. And then we're going to nest an info window inside of that marker, which binds the info window to the marker. We're going to tell it to open on click and close on click, and then we just give it the content of that marker or the info window, and that's pretty much it. So pretty simple. So now we're going to get into a more detailed example of what you can do with kind of this component structure. So not a lot more code here, but there's a lot going on here. So basically what's happening is we're creating a map. The kind of assumption here is that we have a geolocation we've gotten from the user, so their current location. So we're going to create a map centered on their current location with a particular zoom level. So zoom level 15 is kind of like right at street level. It's maybe like a 10-block radius. So then we're going to create a circle that would be centered on their geolocation with a radius of whatever their chosen search radius is, so maybe like 500 feet. So on the map back up here, we have an on click. So it's going to trigger an action, which is going to create a destination. And then right here, if we have a destination, we're going to add a marker to the map. And then we're going to add an on drag handler that would trigger an update destination. So that's going to put a marker on the map that the user can drag around. And whenever that marker lands, it's going to trigger an action that will update the location of that destination. So pretty powerful feature that really took like 2 lines in this template. And then right below that, since I work at a transit agency, I decided to draw some bus stops on the map. So we're just going to do an each loop over some bus stops and then add a marker for each one of those bus stops. This little icon parameter or property lets you specify like a custom marker icon, so you can do some really powerful stuff with that. I've done some stuff with kind of building an icon out of SVG and like dynamically building an SVG as an icon. to put like some dynamically generated info into the icon for the marker itself. So you can do some pretty powerful stuff with that. And then down here, just for the hell of it, I went ahead and created a polyline that kind of connects all the bus stops with a line. So doing something like that with the imperative Google Maps API would be doable, but it would not be a lot of fun. Here it's like just a couple lines of template code. So again, a lot going on here and not a ton of code, and it's all happening for the most part just in the template. So now we're going to dive into some specifics with those 3 add-ons I mentioned, just kind of some pros and cons that might help you figure out what works best for you. So the first one is Ember Gmap. So this one is very focused on Google Maps. So if you have some use case where you have to use Google Map, it's got some feature that you need. Maybe your company is already paying for an enterprise license for Google Maps, like my company, you're kind of land on this one. So it's probably the best way to use Google Maps. Works pretty well with that API. And when you use this add-on, it gives you the entire Google Maps API. So that lets you do stuff like geocoding, calculating directions between 2 points, autocomplete, so like a geocoder autocomplete where a user can type and it'll kind of provide suggestions based on what they've typed. Geometry, which lets you do some kind of complex geometrical calculations on a map. Polyline encoding and decoding, which is something I'll talk about here in a little while. And then the entire like Google Places API, which is kind of like a database of places in the world. So a lot of pretty powerful stuff comes along with this just by virtue of using the Google Maps API. This add-on itself doesn't necessarily implement the entire Google Maps API. I've already, just in the last month, had a few press releases that have gotten merged into, or press releases, PRs, pull requests. Sorry, I came from a PR background. Pull requests have gotten merged into this add-on to add some features that were kind of missing. So that's one benefit of this add-on is like the maintainer is pretty open to other contributors. So, but it is kind of a work in progress. And then a note down here, there's another add-on called Ember CLI Gmaps that I would avoid. It like wraps another wrapper around the Google Maps API. So it's like another layer of abstraction that you have to learn, and it's not great. So I learned that lesson the hard way.
Is it still active? I'll say like, hey, this isn't a thing. Never did it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the next one is Ember Leaflet. So this is the one that's like the 10 out of 10 on Ember Observer. If you don't know Leaflet, it's kind of a standalone mapping API that lets you do all this stuff like adding markers, polylines, info windows, polygons, circles, all that kind of stuff. The only downside to this one, it's got a great API for doing that. The downside though is that it's like bring your own base map, geocoder, directions API. So if you need to do any kind of more advanced features, like geocoding or directions, any of that kind of stuff, you got to kind of bring your own service for that. And then, but the big thing here is bring your own base map. So base map is like the actual map tiles that get shown. So with Google Maps, you get that for free. With Leaflet, you have to bring your own, and this tends to be like a paid service. You got to find someone that's going to do it for you, and it tends to be kind of pricey. So if you're doing any kind of mapping, you can usually get away with like the free level of like Mapbox or Google Maps. But if you want to use Leaflet, you got to make sure you think through what base map you're going to use and make sure that the base map you're using works for the scale of your application and the traffic it's going to be getting. But this library it's awesome. It's got a lot of momentum from the community. It's got a great website with documentation, examples, all that kind of stuff. Another lesson I really learned the hard way is you can use Leaflet with a Google Map base layer, but it kind of sucks. Like if you use Leaflet with any other base map layer, Leaflet has direct control over the base map and everything stays in sync. With Google Maps, Leaflet basically has to load a Google Map, load the Google Maps API, and then it proxies things like drags and clicks into the Google Map, and you end up with this really kind of cool at first, but ends up being really bad, like parallax effect, where you like drag the map. Like you drag the map and you see like your markers and your info windows drag, and then like the map catches up like a second later. So avoid that if you can. And then the next one is Mapbox. So Mapbox is kind of a commercial grade competitor to Google Maps. It's got all the same bells and whistles with geocoding, directions API, all that kind of stuff. It actually extends Leaflet though. So if you use Mapbox, you're getting Leaflet. So you get the same kind of functionality you get from Leaflet, but you get it with all the features that Mapbox offers, including their base map. And their base map, they have a WebGL base map, which if you can do WebGL base map, it's really cool. It's like you get like super smooth zooming. Whereas like if you've ever used a Google map where you zoom and it like kind of, you get a blank screen and it loads in the next zoom level of base map. With a WebGL, it's all just vector graphics and it's really cool. The downside here is cost. So they have a free level, which may work for your application scale, maybe not. They also have like an enterprise level where they kind of come up with the price. So you might land somewhere in there. Just as kind of a benchmark, their pro level is $500 a month, $500 a month. So, but their API, all their features are really awesome. So some gotchas I've picked up during this process. Like I mentioned before, base maps can get real expensive at scale. So make sure you pick one that works for you. Just to kind of RTD, we're currently looking at paying Google about 200 grand a year just to use their Google Maps API at our scale. So it's a lot of money. So yeah. Polyline encoding and decoding. So polyline is like when you want to draw a line on the map. Sometimes you might want to draw a line on the map based on some geolocations you already have in your application, like maybe based on some user input. But sometimes you want to draw a line that's based on some piece of data you're getting out of your database, your API. Like for me, it's like a bus route. So I need to get the shape of a bus route. I'm going to get it from my API, and then I need to draw it on a map. So the polyline encoding lets you take potentially a really large array of coordinates and encode it into a really short string. Just to kind of give some context there, we had a light rail, the shape of a light rail line that as a JSON array of coordinates was 500 kilobytes uncompressed. Encoding that exact piece of data got it down to like 5K. So you can get some major gains out of that. I'm currently working with our backend team to implement that on the backend, and it's blocking some stories, which kind of sucks because we didn't think through that initially, but lesson learned for you. Also, fast boot can be kind of a pain since the mapping APIs are very imperative. They're very focused on the DOM, and they have very strong assumptions that they're being used in the web browser. Don't expect to be able to get fast boot to render a map for you. And I have a few use cases where I'm using other pieces of the Google Maps API to do like looking up places. In fast boot, like you can't even load the Google Maps API because it needs the DOM to even exist. Yeah.
What is fast boot?
So good question. Fast boot is Ember's server rendering solution. So it lets a node server run your Ember app on a server and respond to requests with a rendered HTML page instead of sending down a blank HTML page that then requests all your scripts and then loads your application and then hits your API and then renders your page. Fast boot lets you just immediately send down a rendered page. So if you can get fast boot to work in your application, it's a super huge win. But mapping can be kind of a roadblock if you had some case where you had to have a map rendered in that initial fast boot response. I think you're going to be sad. And then the last one, just like watch out for accessibility. Maps tend to like not be very accessible. So just a generally good idea, if you have like any kind of user interface that like depends on the user being able to interact with the map to like get to a different route or something in your Ember app, just make sure there's some kind of text alternative on the page for them to use. But yeah, so that's it. Go forth and map all the things. Any questions?
Voices for RTDC. Our nickname that will definitely stay.
Yeah.
So which one are you using?
So currently I'm using the Ember G Maps just because we're stuck with Google Maps for now. But I'm really hoping we can move to Mapbox because they kind of offer the same level of features, and I'm hoping they're cheaper and they have a way better API. Like just you can do like a lot more things with Mapbox that you just can't even do in Google Maps. There's another one that I looked into called MapZen, which is like an internal startup at Samsung that Samsung is funding. They're kind of trying to compete with Google Maps and Mapbox. They're currently like free, like they don't have a pricing model. So, and they have like, they'll just like let you access their API basically unlimited if you ask them. So if you have like some short-term app that you don't want to pay a lot of money to implement, like check out MapZen because it won't cost you anything and it's pretty awesome.
How are you working around fast food? Are you just not rendering?
So most of the add-ons, like the Ember Gmap add-on, and I believe Leaflet are fast food compatible. So they'll basically just like, they just have a bunch of conditionals that just won't try to do stuff if it's fast food. So like the initial render from fast food, you just get like a blank placeholder where your map would normally go. And then once the client script loads in, it just renders the map for you. So, I mean, it's not, for us, it hasn't been a huge blocker. I do have one route in the application that has like a before model hook that tries to resolve a place ID from the Google Maps API, and that's like totally broken, can't fix. So that particular route, I'm just gonna have Fastboot like send out a blank page and then have the client render it. But better than nothing, I guess. Any other questions?
Going once, going twice. Thank you.
Stop sharing.
Another thing we've been playing with a little bit in the meetup is
Okay.
yeah, it's cool. So what I'm hearing right now is flexibility is nice, but we need to communicate it a little bit better. What else?
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know what was going on where I was.
I don't know if it was in the meetup invite this week. It has been the last few months we've done this, but that might have been missing. What else?
Green. Yeah, oh yeah, you did.
So I'm guessing I wasn't here, but walk through the guide. Yeah, Lucas.
So I was definitely here from the outset. Dave gave us an option of whether to do like sort of high level conceptual stuff or like just sort of build a really basic thing that did a thing, I guess. And I enjoyed the content we went over, and I think like maybe next month, if I had a choice, I'd probably choose to build a thing that did a thing, because conceptually, I feel like there's just not enough time to really articulate why Ember can shine. So I think getting like fingers on it and like making a really basic application would be like really nice.
Cool. Follow-up question to that. Is that something that you would want to be sort of hands-on, where you're following along on your own laptop, or something where whoever's doing the beginner track would be doing it on their laptop and you're just sort of watching?
I guess like my style of learning would be following along on my machine as well.
So let me do just a general question out to everybody. Fist means I would rather, like, I feel more comfortable, more safe, more whatever if I'm just kind of watching somebody talk about something. 5 means I would rather be hands-on, digging in, following along with the person, and we're doing a more interactive thing. So give me a fist or give me a 5 on this overall. See, mostly 5s, a couple fists. Like, we want to be a welcoming community for everybody. So, like, I think there's ways to get all of that done, but, like, feedback on it. Thank you. Yeah,
It's going to be helpful also if there's just like a GitHub repo or something that afterwards that you go through once we're on our own in case we got lost somewhere during the application. So there's not enough time to troubleshoot everyone's individual problems, obviously. So I think that'd be a great kind of compromise solution.
Hyperjs.com/guides.
And I think I know a person who works on that for no dollars. Oh, he's right there.
If you want to donate dollars, I'm happy.
Yes, you ready? Yeah. All right. So I know him as Dennis. You're about to know him as Dennis. Maybe let's see. Everyone come up with a nickname for Dennis right now? Going once? Going twice? Apparently not. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce you to. That's fine.
All right, so Steve went over map all the things, and I'm going to go over lint all the things. We have a bit of a theme tonight, so if you haven't picked up on it yet. So linting, as I stole from Stack Overflow, like everything I do, is the process of running a program that will analyze code for potential errors. The one thing I would add to that is it's not just errors, it can also just be stylistic things for consistency. So if you try to look for a dictionary definition of this, it doesn't exist. So that's why I had to go to Stack Overflow for this. But Oded said that, so it's truth. So I'm going to go yeah.
I know what the origin of that is.
For linting?
It's a Crockford thing. Douglas Crockford came up with that. It's like when you like get the lint off of your clothes, and you're like, how did this get there? Like, that's the origin. That's the origin of linting?
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's actually a really good segue. JavaScript linting, this first one on the list, was written by Douglas Crockford, which, if you guys don't know, he's one of the founders-ish of JavaScript. He's one of the guys that's kind of made it have its adoption. He's not Brandon Ike, like he didn't do it originally, but he's one of the main guys. So he made a tool called JSLint, and it's very opinionated. It only finds specific errors in JavaScript, but it finds those errors and it warns you that you made this mistake. So that was the first one. Apparently that's where the name came from also, per Kyle, so that's also truth.
I don't know, Kyle. I mean, I think I heard linting even before Crockford came.
I almost say, about 90, maybe 85% positive. That's linting is a Crockford thing.
All right.
It's a per Kyle, it's a Crockford thing. JS Hint, this one's actually included in Ember. So any of you who have played with Ember yet, you already have this. So Ember kind of improved on JSLint that it actually had config. JSLint, you deal with it. Like if you don't like what JSLint does, then you're screwed because there's no options. JSLint expanded on that by having options. You can add custom rules. If you want to have your own, like you cannot use the word and in code, you can make a JS Hint rule that does that. And JS Hint by default it has a set of rules and then you can make them stricter or looser. So it has just a default, but you can make it harder or easier. And there's JSCS, which is purely stylistic, so it doesn't find any errors. So they were trying to deviate from JSLint and JS Hint, and it's only style. So it wouldn't catch any bugs, it wouldn't help you fix any problems, it just points out that your style is different from other people's style. And then there's ESLint, which actually absorbed JSCS not too long ago. So yeah, it does what JSLint, JS Hint does. You can find bugs. It will try to do best practices, and it will also do style. So JSCS felt that they were kind of doing the exact same thing as ESLint, but on one area, and then ESLint was doing it on the other, and they kind of just merged, and they're one tool that does both. So the examples I'm going to use are from ESLint. I really prefer it. I think it has a lot more power than the other ones, especially JSCS since it's deprecated. But my examples are in ESLint, but they apply to other tools. So if you're like, I don't want that, I want to use JSHint because it's included in Ember, a lot of these do apply. So I'm going to show you, hopefully you can see that. Can't really zoom, sorry, can you guys see that? Oh, okay. So front row can see. Okay, so here's some code. It's really awesome code. I'm very proud of it. So this is just some standard code, and if you hit this with ESLint with some rules that I have set up,
You didn't write that.
I did, but deliberately. Yeah, straw man. So this first line, the problems we have is no console. So I have a rule that consoles fail. You can do this if you just don't want that going out to the user. You can also say like, oh, I don't want console dot, just regular console logs, but I do want infos or warnings or whatever else. And I also have no use before defined. So we're using message and it's not declared. We'll catch that and warn you about that. I've got a lot of things here. So I've got Yoda. Yoda is when you do an equality statement backwards. Like you say, if purple is the color, or if true is the user.admin, like that's called Yoda. It's not readable. Like you can't say like, oh, if the user's an admin. You're saying if an admin, it's backwards. It's wrong. Some people do it for efficiency. There are some efficient reasons for that. Those people are stupid. You don't have a user coming and complaining like, holy shit, this function is slow. And you're like, oh shit, it's because I didn't write a Yoda clause. Like that doesn't happen. So we have this rule in my code. It's great. It doesn't happen. This really intuitive one right here, eq is equals. So that's saying in JavaScript, if you use a double equal sign, sometimes that's what you expect, sometimes it's not. It has to do with JavaScript's casting. So by using equals equals equals, you make sure that you're ensuring that that value is exactly what you want. There is no auto cast going on. There's exactly the value that you want. And the no condition assign here, this is a really stupid mistake, and it sucks when you make it. I've done it a lot, but inside an if block, you can assign a value to a parameter, and that assignment resolves to true. That's idiotic because it's not what you want to do. You didn't want to make sure that JavaScript was able to assign a parameter which always succeeds. Always. You want to make sure that you are checking the value of that. So that
Where they
rule for that.
get way wacky though is like PHP developers. Because PHP, that's the shorthand for like if this evaluation like is if the thing that this evaluates to is true, I want to use this variable like in my block.
Oh.
Like that's where that gets wacky. And so like that's the entire reason that confusion exists, because nobody else would want to do that. But that's a really common PHP shorthand.
It's a Ruby thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have people coming from those languages, use this to save them from a lot of debugging. The other ones, mainly stylistic. Banning var, which you should. Requiring that you're consistent with your singles or your equals, or if you want to always use ticks, you can make sure that you have spacing around your plus. You can ban to-dos so that people can't do a pull request with to-dos or fix me's or XXX or whatever they want to do. You can make sure they have spaces around commas, that they have a semicolon or they don't have a semicolon, if you care about that. There are more of these. So right there we have less than a dozen. Here's the ESLint page. So by default, no rules are on, but you can use this extends ESLint recommended, which will pull in all the ones with check marks beside them. And then you can customize it, turn things off and on. It's a good way to start. I would recommend doing that, but if you want to go crazy and customize, there are all of these. So there's just this wall of them. Yeah, 6 ones or stylistic ones. There's ones about deprecations. There's a lot of rules. So
if you're from Galvanize, Danny Fritz wrote about 12 of
them. Really?
No kidding.
No. And yeah, you can write your own too. So you can write your own if you like it, you think the community wants it. You don't have to contribute it, but then yeah, like Danny Fritz, you can submit it, do a pull request, and see if it gets accepted. So template linting, we have less options. We have this one if you're doing Ember. There are HTML linters too. I'm not talking about them. This is the Ember meetup, but as far as template linting, so that's your handlebars templates, there's just this one option. So this is not as bad as my JavaScript. It's a little cleaner. So what we have is here I'm blocking HTML comments, like we can have that as a warning. HTML comments are visible to the user. You can use handlebar comments instead, and only you as a developer see that. That gets compiled out of code. So handlebars, instead of this less than and the greater than here, you use the squirrely bracket, the standard bracket used in code. 2 of them actually, yeah, because it's handlebars. Oh, let me go back. This indentation is off. Also, this image doesn't have an alt tag, which is a really shitty thing for people with screen readers. So you should always use an alt tag, and this can warn you that, hey, you didn't do an alt tag. You should do that. Triple curlies, basically, this is just a really easy exploit. If you're allowing users to enter in data, triple curlies just straight up dumps it in the page. So if this is like some kind of comment engine, and they commented, and then you use triple curlies to display it, you are exploiting that JavaScript. You're throwing that on everybody, and it's a pretty big vulnerability. There are use cases for it, so you can comment around this if it's something where you actually want that. But br/ or image with a slash at the end, that's actually not valid HTML. I didn't know that. It's not valid HTML anymore, so you don't need to self-close tags. If a tag doesn't need to self-close, then you don't need that slash. And so this can warn you about those. I'm going to step on all of Kyle's toes by the time I get done today. And this one, the button, putting a link inside a button is also really bad for accessibility. It's bad for screen readers because you're obfuscating. You're putting inside a clickable element another clickable element. It's really bad practice. Making another thing a clickable, also bad for screen readers, bad for tabbing through. There's a workaround for this. You can tell it like that this mode is a button, that I'm using this div as a button because I hate the button tag. It's too many letters. I don't want to type it. So there are workarounds for that. And here, there are dangers also with using a target of blank. There's a pretty easy fix for that too. And this one is my favorite, this open a new window. If you use accessibility, so many merge requests where me or a coworker forgot to translate something. We made a save button and we just type save, and then we do a pull request and we forgot to translate it. And hopefully the pull request caught it. Otherwise QA hopefully caught it. Otherwise our user caught it because they're like, I don't speak English. I don't know what save is. Like what is this? So this catches it now. Like this warns us when we use a regular string, when we aren't going through a translation library. So this one rule alone is worth it for me. Like this is a lifesaver. Sorry, I keep scrolling and that does bad things. And lastly is CSS lint. So there are a couple options here. There's Sass, there's SCSS, there's CSS lint, and there's style lint. Style lint is a SCSS Sass linter. It can also do CSS. So here's some quality CSS I made. And here's some rules that are going for it. So here I'm erroring over the fact that the hex case is different. You can say that hex cases, hex colors have to be uppercase or lowercase, or you don't care. You can say they have to be 6 characters, or you can say they need to be 3 characters when they can be 3 characters, or whatever. Here you can have max nesting, so you can enforce that people can't do like 5 levels down of specificity. You can require or prohibit using color words. So yellow and white and black and gray, and there's a handful of those. You can require them or prohibit them. My company, we've prohibited them because it's shitty if you're like, oh, well, now I'm 1 color off, so I have to change this.
No, that's the fucked up thing. It is like there's like a phenomenal number of named colors. Like if you look at it, it's like 10,000.
There are a lot. Yeah, there's like light gray. Yeah,
like
pink.
gunmetal gray versus like winter purple or whatever. Like, a lot of named colors.
I mean, it's way more fun to write gunmetal gray than like CCC or something.
And hope the browser interprets it the way it is.
This one, I have no follow-up. I mean, I agree with Lasmer that gunmetal gray is awesome, so I would add that as an exception. I would ban all colors except for gunmetal gray. This one I just have here as an example for this one is no descending specificity. That if you declare something very specific and then later on you just declare like the basic version of that, that's not very readable for somebody who's trying to read top to bottom. So swapping those around makes it easier for people to reason about. No trailing zeros, they don't do anything. Why is it there? So remove that. Here you can enforce no unknown unit, which is good because it doesn't make sense. Like if people are making up their own units, like that should be an error because how is the browser going to interpret that?
Right.
Well, you could just make that a precompile rule that changes gunmetal grays into pixels. And then also just if you wanted stuff on the same line on a different line, if you want like 13 line returns between every break, whatever you want to do, this will let you do it. Surprisingly, like it has num lines between this, num lines after this. This one's really cool. No indistinguishable colors. So I used some CSS analysis tools on our CSS, which a lot of it was outsourced. It's not our fault. But we had like dozens of colors that are the exact same thing but named different things. Or like it was off by the last digit of a hex color, which nobody can see the difference of that. So that should just be a named color. Like you should either use the same color everywhere or just make that a named color. Don't use white and then FFF and then pound FFFFE. Like it just doesn't make sense. And that's everywhere. Like, if you use those tools on websites, it's crazy how much of that exists. So for them too. Way more even than ESLint. There's just tons and tons of rules about befores, afters. There's a lot of different rules. So that's the linting that I use now. That's the linting my company uses. So why? Like, why would we do this? Some of it is catching bugs ahead of time. It's nice when your tool catches that instead of your users. If your users are your main QA team, like some of us. It promotes consistency, so if you step into some code or some CSS, it looks like code and CSS elsewhere in your app. You're not trying to reason about like, oh, well, they do their things backwards, like they speak like Yoda in all of their code. It saves time in code reviews because you're not having to bounce that code review back and forth over stupid stuff, like, oh, you forgot to do this, you didn't use the right format of comment or whatever. Like these tools can catch that, so you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about that. And bike shedding. You don't have to argue about what color the bike shed is when you're building a nuclear power plant. Like that's stupid. Let the tools say that. So establish the rules, make that what accepts or rejects style, and then just don't worry about it. If it gets past that, then you're good. If it doesn't get past it, then they need to go back and fix it, or you need to go back and fix it. So the reason all this is really important, not as much as Ember, but just in our careers, web developers, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS are all very loose. They let a lot of things go by. HTML and CSS, by design, are fault tolerant. So no matter what you do, no matter how bad it is, they have to render something. Even if it's completely wrong, even if every browser does it differently, they have to do something. So you want your stuff to just work. And these are languages and technologies that's a little harder to do that in. So one anecdote to leave this on is this great Stack Overflow post of why does HTML think Chuck Norris is the color? That is a valid color. So you can make Chuck Norris a color in your CSS or in your HTML. And it's this red. There are a lot of different ones. This is valid CSS, this is valid HTML. This is another one that I think should also be excluded. So gunmetal gray and Chuck Norris are acceptable name colors. Everything else is obfuscates what you're doing. So that's my last slide. I don't have a question slide, so no questions. Sorry, I don't have that. Yeah.
So if you write your own like JS extension or whatever, it was just for your project, you just check it into your Ember app, or you have to distribute it to your whole team? How do you actually? Yeah,
I mean, you can just have it locally. You can have it just with your. All of these are dot files, so it's like .eslint, .style lint, which I don't think I mentioned which style tool I use, but it was style lint. So all of them you can just make your rule and just have it locally in your project, or you can, import it from another NPM project or whatever. Yep.
Other questions for this? So can you talk anything about integrating it so that when it does the pull request, it actually runs it, or how does that?
Yeah. So all three of the ones I'm using. So template, ESLint, there's an Ember CLI one. StyleLint, there's an Ember CLI one. When you install these, they'll make you add a few lines of code to your standard Ember config, which is basically the Broccoli config. And then it's just part of Ember test. So if your CI system is using Ember test as a test suite, then you're just good. You have these. And it's more tests too, so that really boosts your confidence that you went from like 200 tests to like 400 tests because every file is now being ESLinted.
Or if you're at bottom, you go, oh my God, it's it's already long enough as it is.
The fun thing is adopting these, the style one, there's so many rules. So I hosted like a lunch and not have fun meeting to go through all of them, and we decided like, what do we as a dev team want to do for all these rules? And we went through every single one of them, and that was our rules. And then I went away, and then I had to fix all of our CSS, so we abided by the rules. But it's nice because now everything works. Like, you don't have to worry about that.
You can also get some sweet like extensions for a lot of text editors that'll just show you like lines.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, with Atom, I have it for Vim. I have that for ESLint. I haven't bothered for like template lint. In fact, probably isn't one, but there definitely is one for style lint also.
What's Vim?
Yes, our NeoVim.
Do you have a preference of ESLint over JSN? You might have addressed that earlier.
ESLint by far. JSLint doesn't have much on the style side. It's more what's right and wrong, and there are things that are right in JavaScript that really shouldn't be right, that are pretty hideous. So I like that ESLint allows you to do that.
How easy is the switch from JSN to ESLint with Ember in particular?
It's just going through the rules. There are way more rules, so it's kind of the same thing where you're either just copy basically your JSN over, figure out what compares and manually figure it out, and then go back and like add all the new nice things. or just grind for an hour and go through rule by rule and decide what you want.
What about a like greenfield kind of thing? Because I run into the same kind of thing where like, yeah, man, you can also substitute this for this. But when I type Ember do whatever, like I have a little single line of code. How do I switch over from JSN to ESLint?
Yeah, and that's gotten a lot better too. So npm install, or actually maybe an Ember install. That still confuses me which is which. I think it's an Ember install, ESLint. Yeah,
Is it a flag on your install?
No, it's not. It's not built in. Several of the core team members do want it to replace JSN, so that may happen eventually. I have no idea. The main maintainers of the ESLint for Ember are core team members, so it has some pretty good backing.
Like how many statements do I have to make to switch over?
So so for starters, I would do the Ember install, and then you need to modify your base Ember config that I always forget the name of, the Ember CLI config file, just to basically disable JSHint so that you're not maintaining two separate hint tools. And then I would go in the ESLint config and just use the recommended. The recommended is pretty good. And then if you don't like some of that, then you can tweak it. But it's basically modifying two files after doing an Ember install. And all of that is in their docs too, so it's actually pretty solid.
So what I'm hearing is it's a lot like doing pods, is where you install, do a thing in the Ember config file, and then you do whatever the hell you do.
Yeah, then you're good, and you don't worry about. For a while, JSHint had to coexist, so we just disabled JSHint everywhere while enabling ESLint, and they got that fixed, so now you can use whatever linting tree you want, which is really nice.
Cool. Any more questions for Dennis? Once, twice. Hey! Woo! Lightning Talks. All Lightning Talks meetup. But Wasmer. I call him Wasmer. Drives me fucking crazy. It's not his name. His name is Wasmer.
This is gonna work. Yeah.
So while he's getting set up here, chat with me a little bit, folks. Thoughts on the meetup? Yeah. Restrooms. They are this way. There is a password on it. It is 4567.
There's no password on it right now. So
oh, really? There you go. Restrooms are that way. No password. I like an idiot, went 4567 into them, and I don't know. I got in there. Other thoughts?
I'm ready.
keep going.
Wasmer's ready. Are you ready? For Dave Wasmer. Yeah!
All right, I can't believe I'm the first person to use this graphic tonight. Because this is the lightning all the things meetup. So this is the session all the things. It doesn't really make any sense. But it's session handling and authentication in single page apps. This actually is not going to be super Ember specific. It will relate to Ember because Ember is a single page app framework. But we're going to be focusing on sort of the high level concepts of how to manage sessions and authentication and why we do these things and the meaning of life. So a high level outline here, we're going to go over a high level of like what HTTP is and how that relates to sessions. Why do we need sessions? And then some common strategies for handling sessions with sort of like the API data-driven model that Ember provides and other single page app frameworks. So first up, a little bit about HTTP. HTTP is a stateless protocol, which is one of those words that gets like thrown around a lot, and I didn't really come to appreciate for a long time. So I think I'd like to try and dive into what stateless means there, because that's sort of central to what sessions and authentication are. So stateless means that every HTTP request is independent of every other HTTP request. So that means that when your Ember app loads up and you make those 37 calls to get all the different models and data from the server's perspective, without any additional knowledge, those 37 requests could have come from 37 different people. It has no idea. It can't look down the pipe, the wire, and see you through your webcam, hopefully not, sitting at your computer, like hacking away or whatever. So it doesn't know that those requests all belong to the same user. They're sort of grouped together. From its perspective, they're just 37 among the 3,000 requests that it served that hour or something. So to try to demonstrate this, I have an interactive portion. So Kyle.
Yeah!
Good job here. So I need Kyle, and then I need 3 volunteers. It'll be easy, I promise.
Oh my god!
3 volunteers. 1, 2. Come on, guys. 1 more volunteer. I'm gonna pick on. All right, there we go. All right, Kyle.
Yeah, hit me.
I need you to stand here.
Okay.
Face that direction.
Hit me.
All right. You guys stand over here by the table. All right. Same props. All right. So we're going to be modeling.
Do I need like a bag or something under my clothes to keep it from getting dirty?
No, there's no.
I probably should have asked that before I volunteered.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing a little demo. No looking, Kyle. We're going to be doing a little demo of what the server experiences when it communicates over HTTP. All right? So I want you to get each of these. Take one of these guys. All right.
Cloud server.
Yes, cloud server. These are the clients, the various. These are the various clients that we have. They're talking to the server at any point in time, right? And each of these things I'm going to describe, they represent a request to the server. All right? So I want you guys to request something from the server.
What do you want? All right.
All right.
All right, what do you want?
So Kyle's gotten all those requests. All right. So, all right. So Kyle got all those requests, but as you can see by looking at the requests and as Kyle could feel, the requests are identical. He can't tell them apart. So,
I've said that a bunch of times.
So if one of the guys was requesting, hey, I want my bank account information, he doesn't know how to tell apart that request from somebody else's requests without any additional knowledge, right?
Nope.
So, So HTTP needs something more. So out of the box, it's just a request. Kyle can't associate it with a particular user yet. So he doesn't know who to give the sensitive information to and who to deny. So the traditional solution is cookies, which this is a great clip. You should all watch it on YouTube. But cookies make your requests unique, and we're going to demonstrate that. Swap that out. Swap that out. And
I already love this. Why don't I have
all right. Now we're going to make additional requests with cookies attached to those requests. Go ahead, guys.
Oh, hey!
Hey, all right.
I'm getting some requests. What's happening?
So now Kyle was able to tell those requests apart. He could differentiate them because the requests were different. They carry with them a unique signature. Kyle, you can turn around. That's it, guys. Thank you. Thank you all. And
Hold on, I got the views going.
wait, Kyle. I want to. Give him a hand. All right, so that was my.
Here's your fucking hand tag.
That was my interactive portion. So what cookies do is they make each HTTP request unique. They differentiate them, right? Just like Kyle would have been able to tell, okay, that was the dog bone, not the baseball that hit me. So there are a lot of different ways that we can do this. Cookies are the traditional approach for making these requests unique and differentiable. But there's other flavors, but it's the same principle. Basically, attaching some bit of data to each request to make it unique from all of the other requests out there so the server knows who it is that it's talking to. So I'm going to talk about, when we talk about sessions and authentication and session transport, there's three sort of topics that I want to go over real quick. The first is transport and storage and content. So transport deals with how does the server actually get the data that makes that request unique, right? And I'm purposely avoiding using the word cookies because there's multiple methods of doing this. Cookies is one. Cookies is really just a cookie header that's attached to the HTTP request. There's another header you can use, the authorization header, which is commonly used for session identification or credentials. You could attach your own custom header to the HTTP request using whatever name you want, X whatever auth custom widget thing. Or you could drop it into the query parameter of the URL itself. Now there's pros and cons to each of these. So, and I'm just gonna run through that real quick. So for cookies, one of the pros of cookies is that the way the browsers are built, cookies will be sent with every request to your domain name, no matter what, automatically. So if you're building your application, if you're using cookie-based authentication, you don't have to, like, every time you make a request, say, oh, don't forget, attach the session ID or something like that to the request. It's just put there automatically for you. That's actually also one of the drawbacks. So anybody who's familiar with CSRF, cross-site request forgery, or has just encountered an annoying token error or something with their Rails backend that had that phrase, because the browser will send that cookie with every single request, if I'm a malicious attacker, I can create a form on my website that I control that submits to your backend and does something damaging, transfer money to my account or something like that. And if I can get the user, unsuspecting victim, to come onto my website, fill out that form and hit submit, which I could easily do by just labeling everything differently, like, hey, free giveaway, cruise to the Caribbeans or something, then it will submit that request to your domain name using their cookies. Like, they'll be logged in, right? So it allows any attacker to basically just start using your backend if they can convince the user to press a button on their website. So that's a problem. Now, typically the way that's countered is, like, every time the page loads, the server generates a random value that gets sent along with the page, so that way we know if, like, the form that submitted the request came from our server or an attacker server. But there's a lot of stuff to manage there, basically. You've got to manage those tokens, make sure they're on every request. Frameworks will do that for you. Rails bakes that in out of the box. Ember has some solutions to help you with that, but that is a potential drawback. Authorization header has to be added manually to every single request on your own. The advantage is that it's not added automatically to every single request, so there is no such thing as a CSRF attack that uses the authorization header. So if your backend doesn't respect cookies as an authentication source, then it doesn't have to worry about CSRF attacks. Custom header is basically the same thing as authorization header, but it's more of a screw standards approach. And then query parameters is kind of the left field one. You'll see that sometimes if you need to make a request by clicking on a link to go to an API, then query parameters is good because you can't attach headers by just having the user click a link. So that's transports. That's how the session information gets to the server and back. Storage is a different story. So storage is obviously every time you load the page, it's sort of like from scratch, the browser builds the website, the Ember app that you're working in. So obviously we need some way to store that differentiating bit of information so that even the browser knows it's the same user from page to page to page, right? So there's two primary ways that you can do that. There's cookies, they're a theme throughout this presentation. And that's handled by the browser for you. It's a small file that sits on your local machine. There's certain restrictions to it, but you usually won't encounter them. Or local storage. There's a couple advantages that cookies have here. Cookies, you can do two things. You can set an HTTPS only flag and an HTTP only flag, or SSL only, I forget what they're called. But basically, it allows you to say this cookie cannot be read by JavaScript and can only be transported over SSL connections, which is really nice. It lets you add an additional layer of security. It ensures that if a malicious attacker is able to inject JavaScript into your app, they're not going to be able to get to the cookie because you've set the HTTP only flag. The browser JavaScript can't access the value in there. The drawback is that if you're dealing with an Ember application, if you have an XSS vulnerability, if somebody can inject JavaScript into your app, that's probably game over anyway. The Given the way the app is architected, if you have a data API that's serving it, most likely your Ember code is adding whatever authorization headers to every single request anyway. So if they're executing JavaScript in your domain name, you're kind of screwed already, so it doesn't really matter at that point. Local storage has the drawback that it is accessible by JavaScript. You can't protect it in that way. It's a little bit more flexible in terms of storage limits, but again, most people will never encounter those limits. And lastly is the content. So we've talked about that bit of information, like how do you separate each request that goes to the server? How do you tell them apart? And we've talked about the ways to attach that bit of data, where to store that bit of data in the browser, but we haven't talked about what that bit of data is. Like what is it that actually lets the server tell each request apart? And there's, broadly speaking, I painted it with a broad brush here, but 3 categories. There's session ID with some additional details, or assigned auth token. So session ID is basically just saying, like, look, we're just gonna come up with a really, 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 really random number. And you get that number. And that way I know it's you every time. And then as the server, if I need to store some additional information like, I don't know, your name, or are you an admin, that kind of thing, it's up to the server. Like every time that request comes in, oh, you're user 74321. I'm gonna go look up that information. Okay, yes, you're an admin, you're allowed to do this. The second approach is to say, okay, some of those details, like are you an admin, we may wanna access that quite frequently. So let's go ahead and try and store that information in the actual session value. And then you still have to verify that like the session ID actually exists and is valid. But at that point, you don't necessarily need to look up maybe joined data from the database or something. And the last approach is an auth token, which kind of deserves its own slide. Auth tokens are a slightly different approach. The session ID is basically saying, look, I'm going to give you a number that nobody else is going to be able to guess. And that way it'll be secure. And when you make a request, I have all the, as the server, I have all the pertinent information about you. I know if you're an admin, I know what access you have, I know your name, that kind of thing. I can look it all up. Tokens take a slightly different approach. Tokens say, we're going to encode all of that information in the bit of data that's passed around. It becomes this token that has data inside it. And then we use a signature. So this is where it starts to get fancy, but for those of you that don't have a lot of cryptography background, signing something is basically a way of proving that it hasn't been tampered with. So as an example, let's just say that this string here was the value of the token, right? And this could be the signature, and I just came up with this randomly, but this is using like the easiest algorithm in the world to break. I picked every other letter. So I-M-N-D-I-N, exclamation mark. And so that's the signature. And then I know if you change any value in here, the signature is not going to match unless you happen to pick an even letter, in which case it would still match, and that's why it's a bad algorithm. But you get the idea. Signature shows that this hasn't been tampered with. The reason this works is because I have some kind of secret on the server, like some secret passcode, some secret method of generating this signature that you don't know about, that nobody else in the world can figure out. So that way I can look at the contents of the token and I can prove to myself that I'm the one who created that token and it hasn't been tampered with since then. So this lets you actually move information, sensitive information about the user into the token itself. So you could encode, I'm an admin, like admin equals true inside the token and pass that around. Then when the request comes in, you'll get you look at that token value, you'll see it's claiming, the user's claiming they are an admin. You can verify the signature, you can pull out every other letter and say, okay, yeah, I wrote that token. Then you don't have to go to the database. You don't have to pull out all this additional information. All the information is right there for you. It comes with the request, and all you've done is basically prove that the user hasn't tampered with it or tried to create their own token to fool you. The nice part about tokens is that they allow you to pass around authorization. So you can have a third-party system that doesn't have any connection to your databases at all, right? And if they have this token, they know your secret, that third-party system can verify that the user is who they say they are. So that token becomes something that the user can carry with them to any other third-party service. versus the session ID, which is basically there's nothing in the session data that tells you anything about the user other than like their randomly generated ID. So that's kind of the overview. And since this is a lightning talk, that's pretty much it. But I'm going to wrap up with my completely biased and opinionated recommendations for you all. Knowing nothing about the applications that you build, I'm going to suggest what you should do. So in the first category here, and this is sort of perhaps the most controversial statement, I'm going to suggest that you guys try to avoid cookie auth. So this is a bit controversial, but from my perspective, cookie auth opens an entire vector for attacks, cross-site request forgery, like we talked about. The attacker has their website, has a form, they can submit it. And certainly frameworks like Rails can help prevent this, but it's a lot of overhead. And it's really overhead from a mental perspective. It's another attack vector that you, the developer, have to keep in your mind and make sure that every single request to your application has that CSRF token. On the flip side of the authorization header approach, where you don't use cookies, eliminates an entire class of attack vectors. Like CSRF is no longer a problem that you have to keep in your head and think about. Instead, it does, theoretically, it is more vulnerable to cross-site scripting attacks. Like somebody else can run JavaScript on your page. They can then go into local storage, get the authorization header value. They could pull that out and do whatever they want. But like we talked about earlier, we're talking about single-page web apps. So if they can run JavaScript on the page, game's already over. Like, no point in continuing. So in this sense, my suggestion is that you guys consider using authorization headers with local storage rather than cookies, precisely because it eliminates that entire possibility of attack and lets you double down on the areas like cross-site scripting that you already have to focus on. Like, regardless of what kind of session auth you use, you already have to protect yourself against cross-site scripting. So you might as well double down your focus on that and not distract yourself with this other attack vector. And then here, another controversial recommendation. I'd suggest using session IDs only, or maybe session IDs with this, and don't use JWTs, which JWTs are kind of like the new hotness on the block.
Fuck you, Dave!
Thank you, Kyle. So the main reason is a lot of people talk
All
about—
my students used to still use shots. JWPs. Fuck you, Dave.
So the main benefits that people talk about when they talk about JWTs are performance and federated access. So performance, because you don't have to talk to a database. All the authorization details are right there in the token. You don't have to go out to Redis or whatever. I would be willing to bet money that nobody in this room works on an app that a single Redis cluster could not easily serve all of the session data. And that the latency introduced by going to Redis is incredibly small. And any non-trivial application is likely going to have Redis or Memcache or something that you would store session information in anyway. So it's sort of like you probably already have the infrastructure. It's not really going to cost you that much in the grand scheme of things. And you avoid the hassle and the dangers of dealing with some of the cryptography elements that come with JWTs. And the biggest problem with tokens is that because they carry the authorization in the token itself, you can't revoke access. So with session IDs, I could, if I wanted to, I could go into Redis and just delete all the sessions and be like, screw everybody, you're all logged out now. Or if there's a specific attacker or somebody who's trying to DDoS the system, whatever, I can go in and delete their session, and then they're no longer logged in. But because the auth token carries the authorization information in the token itself, because the server doesn't check a database at any point in time to verify that token, when you have your service running live, you actually cannot prevent somebody from accessing it as an authorized user. Unless you want to go ahead and build like a list of revoked tokens in Redis, but that's sort of like, well, you're defeating the whole point of tokens then. So there are significant drawbacks, I think, with tokens. I think I'm willing to bet money that every single person in this room would be totally fine in terms of scale and feasibility of using sessions. So that's my highly opinionated, biased recommendation. But yeah, questions about that?
Wow. Questions for Dave.
Yes. Go ahead.
was.
Is there any concern about, so yeah, like if you're running JavaScript, I get the idea, like running JavaScript, you're already screwed. But
we're all screwed, guys.
Well, but what about Phantom, right? Like I could easily script pretty much all of this to easily grab access tokens, log you in, that kind of thing, and do it in sort of an automated fashion, right?
As an attack vector?
Yeah.
What would you, I'm not sure I follow, what would you get with Phantom? You
So,
couldn't intercept anybody else's session.
You wouldn't necessarily intercept anybody else's. I guess how I was taking the like local storage and like if you're running this already, I guess I just struggle getting away from like the issuing of a cookie, but I guess it's the same everywhere. I don't know. Never mind.
I'm glad I could help.
I talked myself out of it.
Any more questions like that one?
Those are fun ones to ask.
Yeah.
So other questions? Yeah. So this isn't so much a question, more observation.
Sure.
So I can tell you, in our experience, we ended up actually not using local storage for keys. We had a legacy application that was written in language.
Wait.
Sorry. That nobody knows how to use anymore, and so we ended up actually having to support that, and so that would be a reason why you go down.
Sure.
Road.
Yeah, if you don't have total control over the back end and the front end, then certainly, yeah, your hands may be tied here. I guess my recommendation is more for greenfield applications. But yeah, if your hands are tied, then hopefully this helps outline some of the options that might be available.
This has been a great kind of high-level topic discussion on this stuff.
Plus, we got to throw things at Kyle. So
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
That's really why I gave this talk. It started out I wanted to throw something at Kyle, and then I was like, how can I make that a metaphor? Yeah, exactly.
Other questions for Dave? Once. Twice.
So like Ember add-ons that kind of support some of this stuff, or like?
No idea. No, so Ember Simple Auth is a very popular, widely used authorization and authentication library. It comes with the idea of different strategies where you can say, I want to use a token strategy or some other strategy, whatever. So a lot of the frameworks that handle authentication and authorization will tend to have that approach of like, you can just plug in, do I want to use local storage or something like that, I can't really speak to the back end. I'm an Ember developer, so.
Other question for Dave. Once I was going to tell you, so we do use Ember Simple Auth, and it works fine.
Yeah, I've used it in many projects.
Me too. Other questions for Dave. Your last access to him ever. Once.
Wait, why?
We're about to end him. And thank you, Dave! So that's Member Meetup. We've had bigger ones before.